Welcome, baseball fans around the world, to another episode of the Highland Bullpen Baseball Podcast. It is, as we record tonight, only 5 weeks until the MLB season 2024 begins, and all of our teams involved in spring training, and all of us still have hope in our hearts at this stage. Now, last week we covered off the PECOTA ratings, and I used to think that was a state which had Black Hills in it, but no, it's a method of predicting how your baseball teams will get on and how many games they will win. So last week we discussed how the Mariners, the Red Sox and the Tigers would fare. Would they do better or worse than the PECOTA projection? But we didn't get a chance to hear about the Chicago White Sox, the beloved MLB team of Dave Jr. So Dave Jr., for the PECOTA ratings, they don't seem to hold out much hopes from your boys from Chicago.
Yeah, I must be on the wrong podcast. Sorry, Richard. I thought it was PECOTA ratings. So I went with chicken and vegetable. And I'm afraid that's me out.
We now know what it stands for. It's good.
Yeah, that's a foul joke. Really, really interesting. So I think, as chance would have it, I've been having a look at the PECOTA ratings anyway. And as Alan chided me for during the week, if I'd actually listened to last week's podcast, well, not only would the viewership have doubled, but I would have known exactly what to talk about this week. If you don't mind, Richard, I think if I talk about PECOTA, the White Sox comes down to effectively zero chance of anything for next year. And to get the sort of thought process behind that really comes from what's been happening over the last 6 to 9 months with the White Sox. In fact, to go back even further, if everyone wants to put their feet up, grab some Werther's Originals and put a little tartan blanket over their lap, which again might just be Alan. The White Sox were really in a mode, as they say in the States, to win mode towards the end of what would they be, the tweenies? Is that what they call them? And it just didn't happen. I think, as has been talked about quite widely in Chicago circles, I think the White Sox are the first real club who have went through a fabled rebuild and nothing has came of it. So a lot of other guys have been through it and reached kind of ALCS or kind of National League Championships or the World Series itself, or even won it all. Look at it, I think there's 4 or 5 different teams, and the White Sox started this process about 10 years ago. And don't worry, I'm not going to go through the 10 years, but it effectively came to nothing over the last couple of years. This should have been a time when the White Sox were building towards being in World Series or winning them. I seen a really interesting graphic the other day. I think we're all familiar with the MLB pipeline by now, which is, for those of you that aren't familiar, it's generally a look at everyone's youth setup, if you bring that back to Scottish football, and it's identifying who's got the strongest up-and-coming kids to come through. And it's ridiculous. If you look at the state of affairs back in 2017, I think the White Sox is something like 12 of the top 100, maybe 3 of the top 10. And it really was, at that point, destined to be a team put together with top draft picks, top college prospects, into a team that would do well. And if you don't mind me indulging for a second, I think that even when we started this podcast, we had some experts on from the States who were all not mega keen on the White Sox, but we're talking about them as being real contenders over, if not that year, but the coming years. Like I said, it's not came to anything. And last year's results kind of signified that. As it was really clear, as last year developed, we started to let a lot of players go and getting a whole lot of trades in the door, bringing in more prospects and letting these guys go that were in the last year. So our pitching, either through the trade deadline last year or in the off-season, is completely decimated. We've lost most of our starters. We're left with really Dylan Cease, who is familiar to most. And again, the only reason that we're left with him just now is that he's got 1 year left in his contract, and that the White Sox have been playing hardball in terms of what they want back for him. I still think there's a chance that he won't be there for opening day. Many teams have been in touch with the White Sox to see exactly the availability of him. The White Sox want a good haul back. They want some prospects. They want, they want some good players back to cover a lot of deficiencies that we have as a team. I've got the feeling that if one of the top contenders that are in win mode, I've got a feeling if they suffer an injury over the next few weeks, I think they might pull the trigger and try to get someone in like Cease, who would slot right into anyone's rotation, albeit potentially at the top. But even a lot of these teams might slip him in as a third or fourth or fifth starter. If that tells you we don't really have much pitching just now, we've let some established names go as well. The wage bill, I think similar to Dave's Red Sox, the wage bill has came right down. That might be in keeping with the fact the White Sox are reportedly on the move in the next couple of years, really looking to relocate within Chicago. So there could be something there from an ownership point of view where you're cutting that wage bill and trying to finance a stadium. A lot of that's hearsay just now. But the team is not in great shape in terms of star names going into next year. We still have some of the old faces, but what we've tried to do is bring in a lot of prospects, but also guys on 1 year deals. And the idea there is to rectify the clubhouse. And the thought process has been in recent years that the clubhouse hasn't had any leaders. It's not had any direction. It was just a bunch of potential stars thrown into the mix and told, hey, you're going to be stars. But nothing's really been there to gel them or to put them forward. Even to take that to the nth degree, you'd supposed superstars last year who were given a rookie manager. So when you start to look at those things, look at what Texas did last year by bringing in a proven manager. They went places. So it's not being advertised as a rebuild for this year. It's been re-advertised as a retool. But really, there's nothing expected of the White Sox. It's been a long way to answer your question, Richard, but there's no real prospects. The White Sox are meant to finish fifth in the division this year. There's no chance of the playoffs. Again, the one shining light that always comes through in the AL Central is the fact that it's a really weak division. You've no one in there that's going to run away with 100 wins. You've no one in there that's probably going to hit 85 or 90 wins. It's competitive. So even if the White Sox are down on big names, there's the hope that they can still pull something together. And it's really about not 2024, but building towards 2025. So it's not looking at 2027. There is a belief that there's still some talent in the club and in that weak division to move towards competing in 2025. So it's a bit of a long answer, but hopefully it explains the reasons to why those White Sox numbers are so low.
No, it does, and thanks for that, Dave. And you mentioned the other, it's maybe not the strongest all-round division in NLB there, but I think the Pecota ratings reckon the Twins will finish a handful of games ahead of the Guardians in that division. I know Alan, as a Tigers fan, will have his own view, but does that feel right to you, Dave? I don't know if you've had much chance to see what the other teams in your division are doing, but Twins ahead of Guardians?
Probably. I mean, the Twins they've got some good players, but nothing great. I do quite like Cleveland, if I'm being honest. They've always got such a terrific pitching squad in there. For years and years and years, they've developed some top range pitching. Even I think last year they had horrific injuries, but the guys they brought up from the minors were really, really, really strong and stepped right in. So it's been. Yeah, sorry, a little for everyone listening. Either Alan will cut this bit out. We're having a fit of the giggles. Just a little offline joke. But no, the Guardians and the Twins are probably up there. The Tigers, no one really knows what they can do yet. I don't think the Tigers know what they can do. But there's probably a lot of potential there, if that's fair, Alan. And the Royals are not making many moves. They're there and thereabouts, but I don't think they're openly challenging. So those numbers feel right where the Tigers might come in. I'm not sure, Alan, if you disagree.
we'll just cross there. We'll just cross from Dave Junior to Alan then. Alan, does that sound about right to you? And what's your Tigers perspective?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing I was going to say when Dave was talking about the lack of starters is Pecora is one of my favourite starters. So I don't really see the problem here.
Yep, we're getting meditation every day of the week, I think, Alan.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was fascinating. Actually, Dave made a really good point about a few years ago how people were talking up the White Sox so heavily, and I think they've been in the playoffs once or twice in that time, and I think we all had a little bit of hope that one of our teams is going to do it, and then it just sort of it just seemed to fall apart. It didn't achieve it, and it is interesting that as relative novices to the game that you've got this 5-10 year building cycle and you're convinced your team are going to do it, but there's 30 teams out there, and are we now consigned to a lifetime of this never happening? The Tigers I look at and you always think there's good players in there. We've had good spells of the season. I think you had something like if you took, and I know this is Rangers would have won the league if they hadn't drawn those 2 games, sort of thing. But I think if you look at the last 4 months of last season, the Tigers were the best team in the Central or something. So you've got to have a little bit of hope there. I think I don't know whether it's like a city hope as well. The Lions did so well in the NFL. The Red Wings are hanging on, hopefully for a playoff place. So can you get a city bounce that things go well and it gets the teams going, it gets the fans going? Do people see their fellow city teams doing well and realizing the importance of grinding out results? Or do I just live in hope? It's probably as simple as that, Richard.
Well, no, this is the time of the year when we can all have that hope, Alan, and we'll see how long it lasts for all of us once you get into April and May as well. And obviously, both of you referred to the idea of cycles, the idea of baseball success being cyclical and building towards via good use of drafts, good farm systems. But for some teams, and I think those from Boston would agree, there is little patience for that slow build up, and actually success is the only acceptable option for some of the more storied names among the baseball teams as well. So for the Red Sox of Boston, Yorkshire, Dave, what are your thoughts at the moment?
Yeah, just pick up on what something Alan said there. The city bounce, it definitely happens in Boston. I think last year, you had there's an overlap with the seasons with basketball and the hockey, and you will see when I think the Celtics and the Bruins are doing well, you will see Celtics caps at the Bruins games and vice versa. So yeah, and everyone in Boston and New England supports the Red Sox. So yeah, and likewise what Dave was saying about the top 100, I did see that today in the MLB email, I think, and I had a quick look down it and I thought, there's not going to be who's going to be in there from the Red Sox. So Rafi Devers is the first one, some 30 something, and you have to go. I'm pretty sure I didn't miss anybody. I think you have to go all the way down to 90 something to see Tristan Casas, who had a rookie season last year. And then you have a closer look and you see all the players' names that you recognize who have worn a Red Sox uniform. And I thought I was going to go, a whole preseason without mentioning the Mookie Betts trade. But obviously Mookie Betts is up there. Xander Bogaerts is in there. Schwab's, who was a personal favorite of mine, was there. JD Martinez. So you've got all these veteran great players who are no longer playing for the Red Sox. So it starts you thinking, what are they up to? What are they doing? What are this ownership doing? And then you look at the payroll, and I'm hoping I'm looking at in the right places. As Spot Rack seem to have the most recent few years lists of payroll by team, and it's not finished yet, 2024, but Red Sox are 11th in the list. Last year, they were 13th. The previous 2 years, 6th and 6th. So, it's a down trend when you look. You go back to 2018 when they won the World Series. They had the highest payroll. 2019, the highest payroll. But something has definitely changed, and there's certainly, you look at the roster and the sort of projected lineups. They're going for youth. They're bringing their players through the farm system, relying on picks, and they're certainly not going for big names. They've invested in Rafi Devers. He doesn't like being called the face of the franchise, but he pretty much is. He's only 27. He could field a team. I didn't really look closely at the pitching, but even the pitching, is mainly young guys coming through. But they could field a team that's pretty much just all under 30, apart from possibly Trevor Story, who'll be a shortstop at 31. So, the ownership, you don't want to criticize the ownership really, because they came in 2002 and they really did spend, and they produced 4 World Series. I would, prefer Mr. Henry. Could he, as he finished, there's more money in Premier football, isn't there? I think it's investment in Liverpool. I prefer him to see, well, I've had enough of football, sell Liverpool, put the money into the Red Sox, and for me that would be a 100% win-win situation. But I don't think it's going to happen, and it is important. It's not a guarantee of success, is it, to spend. Just ask your average Mets fan that. But you look down, and I look down to the last 30 years, particularly at the Red Sox, and all through the last 20 years when they've won 4 World Series, second highest, numerous times, third, fourth highest. And then you go back to the 90s, and they weren't really quoted. And I did notice the Toronto Blue Jays in the early and mid 90s were top highest payers, and it's no coincidence they won their 2 World Series in 92, 93. So yeah, it does mean something, but they're definitely not going. They're going down a completely different route, and we'll see how that is responded, what the response is from the fans. I get emails from them about ticket sales, and even for opening day at Fenway, where the ticket price is always higher out there for opening day, but there's availability everywhere. And I think you could see an awkward season for the Red Sox. They've got good coaches though, and one hopes that they bring out the best in these promising players that they've got. So that's it from me. Good luck, Red Sox.
Well, no, thanks for that, Yorkshire Dave. And you mentioned the Blue Jays there, and they were such a powerhouse when I first started. I'm actually going to say listening to baseball, because I used to listen to it in the Armed Forces Radio and Television Network on the old medium wave radio. And you had like Alomar, Dave Winfield, and guys like that. That was a real powerhouse team of the early 90s. But you're absolutely right. Money doesn't guarantee success. It guarantees you've got a better shot at success. Is how I would look at it. And I actually think the Red Sox and the Mariners are really in quite a similar position, Yorkshire Dave. And ironic then that that we're facing that together. I think the Mariners, I just don't have a clue, if I'm totally honest, what the season ahead looks like. But it kind of makes me think just reminds me how odd last season was, where we were fantastic against our division rivals. The only one we didn't have a winning record against, and even then it wasn't a shameful record with the Rangers that went on to win it all. So we should have had a good season, I think. And a big reason why we didn't ultimately, and why we just missed out in the playoffs for Seattle, was all about France. To me, tie France, just that it's a team game, as we often talk about, and it's all about the depth of your roster. But he was such a big part of the Mariners' arsenal. And then when he had a misfired last season, I think that was literally the difference between making the playoffs and not as well. So if we get the Ty France back of 21 and even 22, that gets us a long way forward. We've lost Eugenio Suarez, and I don't think there's an obvious answer at the moment at third base. Matt Chapman's a free agent still, a really good third baseman. Maybe a bit. He might actually add to the Mariners' problem of striking out too often because of his style, but certainly as a third baseman, I think he'd be a real good acquisition. So if we get Ty France back and performing at first base, find a solution at third, get the corners sorted out. I still have hope, but I think for the Mariners, it's absolutely essential that they start hot. And I actually think for Boston as well, it's really important that you start hot as well.
Yeah.
And obviously, since we are facing each other in the opening series, the Mariners and the Red Sox, we ain't both going to get what we want there. So I think that'll be a really interesting start. Mariners at home to the Red Sox and then at home to the Guardians. So not that their home record was a lot better than their away record, than their record on the road last season. It was slightly better. But for the Mariners, we definitely need to start hot as well, I think, because it's not something that we've done in the last few years. So yeah, I do have some optimism about the Mariners, but it's so many unknowns at the moment. So, and as just talking about how the Red Sox and the Mariners face off, the Tigers and the White Sox are also facing each other the opening day. So it was nice of MLB to be so considerate as to ensure all four Highland Bullpens franchises faced each other on the opening day. Should make for a fiery start to the season for our teams as well. So would we settle for a split series, Dave? If the Red Sox and the Mariners is a 4-game series, would you be happy for a 2-2 on the road to start?
Yeah, I think I'd take that, so get a decent start, isn't it? I think Red Sox have got a 10-game, start off with a 10-game road trip, so they don't play their first game at Fenway until the 9th of April. Having said that, I'd need to check, but I don't think they have the best of home records, actually. So, yeah, I couldn't really tell you who's going to be the starting pitchers for those opening games. There's a bit to go yet, isn't it, in terms of the spring training and getting that rotation out. I think that's important. What you said about getting the infield right as well, I think that's what the Red Sox were trying to do. We mentioned last week. You need specialist players at these infield positions, I think, even in the outfield, although I think you can have a little bit more of a mixture there. But yeah, you need a proper first baseman, second baseman, third baseman, the shortstop, so you get that double play off, and the defense is absolutely vital in this game, and the Red Sox were very poor last year, and I think that's what they try to do. They've got this guy, Vaughn Grissom, I mentioned last week. So yeah, and Trevor Story's going to be back at shortstop after his injury last season. So yeah, I'm hopeful from that point of view there'll be an improvement. And you've got J-Rod.
Yep.
He's the man, isn't he? You've got a real star there. Have we got a star in Rafi Devers? Yeah, but this guy J-Rod looks sensational. He could be the one to really spark it for you.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. Rafa Devers a top player, but I agree there's a level above that you sometimes see, and you have Hugh, your Otanis and others, but people that can just transform potentially the fortunes of a whole ball club. And I think he's definitely in that realm among that number. The other Mariners bit pitching we've still got the top 5 to the rotation in place that we had last year, and I think generally it would stand comparison really right across MLB in terms of strength of that top 5, that starting rotation. I think once you go beyond that, once you get beyond kind of Castillo, Gilbert, Kirby, Miller, and Wu, we need to get lucky with injuries, to be honest with you, in a way that we weren't, I think, last year at times. And for a Mariners point of view, above all, we need to stop striking out. I think there was only 1 or 2 teams in the whole of baseball last year that struck out more than the Mariners did. So we need to get bat on ball and start manufacturing some runs, as well as try to get some big hits. And
that was becoming much more the thing, wasn't it, as they did away with the shift.
Yep.
Then because the game had gone, they don't mind about strikeouts as long as you're getting fair share of home runs. It was I don't want to say that word asterisk, 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 or bust. But now I think we're getting back to old time baseball, like you say, manufactured runs, bat on ball, hit and run, that sort of thing. So yeah, I think that's I think they did the right thing with that getting rid of the shift, by the way.
Yeah, no, I think so as well. And for Mariners fans, not just for Mariners fans, but we will have a voice of Seattle on the show in the next week or two as well. Our man in the ground in Seattle. So we'll hear a bit more about what the sense is in the city and among fans there as to what the season holds in store. We do a little bit of a roundup of just anything else that's caught our eye in the world of baseball over the last 7 days. I noticed that the furore over the A's in Las Vegas and will they ever end up there and when still seems to be rumbling on as well. But I wonder if any of you guys, I don't know if Dave Jr., if there's been much else around the wider world of baseball, or Alan, if anything else has caught your eye.
There hasn't at the moment, Richard. I'm really looking forward to tomorrow night. It's kind of a little mini opening night.
Yep.
And it's just a small point, but the next 3 Friday nights, the White Sox face off against the Cubs, all 3 Friday nights, and I'm just looking forward to it. They're all about 8:30 UK time. They might be pre-season or spring training, whatever you want to call it, but it's still some men throwing some balls, it's some men holding sticks, and I'm very excited by that.
And it doesn't get much better than that, absolutely. And Alan is a man who's been, I don't know if Alan or Yorkshire Dave would have been at most spring training games, or between you who's been at most. But I know, Alan, you've definitely been at spring training contests before.
Yeah, I've been to Lakeland to see the Tigers, so maybe throw a wee advert in there for anyone going to Orlando in March that Lakeland is the nearest spring training ballpark for any visitors to Florida. So you can go and see the Detroit Tigers and start a lifetime love affair of that if you ever decide to go along and enjoy a beer and the baseball and some sunshine. So it's a grapefruit league. I don't know how competitive it is. I know the games are reasonably competitive. I don't know if they put a lot of onus on winning the Grapefruit League or the Cactus League for the one over in Arizona. Arizona's a bit different. I think it's all centered in Phoenix, metropolitan Phoenix area, whereas in Florida it's spread around the state, mostly on the Gulf Coast, the West Coast, with a few teams on the Atlantic Coast. I think that sounds fantastic. The Cubs and the White Sox on a Friday night, and I'm assuming somebody's arranged that sensibly. It makes for good viewing. We live in a world of Scottish football where if that happened, we'd probably think that's just happened randomly, and nobody even realised it until it fell into place. So well done to the schedulers there. Spring training is your classic baseball. Sit and watch a game in the sunshine, and I know some teams might do that pretty much all year round. But for us northern teams, you're sitting watching a baseball game with a beer in the sunshine. You can't get an awful lot better than that. So yeah, I'd thoroughly recommend it. And our hopes are still high. I did notice you started us off by saying hopes in our heart, Richard, and yeah, I wasn't quite sure if I was supposed to carry on with a song that you possibly had in mind there, but I decided not to.
You probably wouldn't have known the words, Alex. That's absolutely fine. And you mentioned beer, baseball, and sunshine. Well, over here in Scotland, it's easy to get one of those three, but unfortunately, it's a bit harder getting the other two. But we will be covering in future episodes a guide to watching and viewing and listening to Major League Baseball for those of us in the UK. So please stay tuned for that. It'll be a helpful guide to how you can make sure you catch as much of the 2024 MLB season as you possibly can. So we'll look forward to that. And with that, we'll bring to a close this week's episode of the Highland Bullpen. We'll see you next week on the countdown to MLB season 2024.